The Industrial Revolution, a time period of American history when many technological advancements were made, expansions of business, and growth of economy. Because of the Industrial Revolution, many immigrants came to the United States, which strengthened the country. In addition, more people started working in factories, which made the United States have a stronger workforce. From the time of the Civil War ended to about when World War II started, America's economy was heavily industrialized, with America being mostly a producer. But how did America's economy become so heavily relied on industry? It all started after when the Civil War was won by the North. Before the American Civil War, the South economy was the fourth largest in the world. Though the North was more industrial than the South had the top export of cotton. The South produced huge amount of cotton and tobacco, which made the South's economy rely heavily on agriculture. In fact, the United States economy was dominated by agriculture, making it up to 60% to 70% of its economy until the Civil War. But then a conflict occurred. The southern states wanted to separate from the northern states because of laws restricting slave labor in the United States. It started the national dispute and started the American Civil War. Many lives were lost and taken during the war. In the end, it resulted with the North winning the war and the South still being unified with the United States. After the war, much of the South was burnt, including the cotton fields. The South didn't have as much control on their economy, which weakened the South's economy. But in the North, industries were still growing. Many advancements were made in technology and business. From then until World War II, the U.S. had heavily relied on the industrial part of its economy. It nearly made up 45% of the United States economy, having around 35% of the country's labor force work in industries. This time period of rapid advancements was called the Second Industrial Revolution or Technological Revolution. The Second Industrial Revolution brought many jobs for people in the United States. One of them was the construction of railroads. During the late 1800s and early 1900s, the United States encouraged the construction of railroads around the country. One of the people who invested lots of money in railroads was Cornelius Vanderbilt. He owned 4,500 miles of railroads. Even after he died, the development of railroads in the United States still grew. From 1860 to 1890, the railroads in the United States have expanded more than 10 times than it was in 1860. And the network of railroads still grew until the United States had 3,500,000 miles of railroads, making the United States have the largest railroad network in the world. The Second Industrial Revolution didn't just bring expansions of transportation, but also technological innovations and advancements. Many inventors like Thomas Edison created many new inventions and commercialized them to the public, like his machines which operated on direct current and the fluorescent light bulb, which had the greatest commercial impacts from all of his products. Other inventors like Nikola Tesla created the alternating current, and Samuel Morse, who invented the Morse code, which helped us communicate from far distances. By far, the richest people to ever live in the United States were from the Second Industrial Revolution, like John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie. Both Rockefeller's and Carnegie's net worth are over $370 billion US today. John D. Rockefeller started in the oil business in the United States before the Middle East became the major producer of oil. Andrew Carnegie owned a steel manufacturing business. It brought lots of cities to new heights like New York and Chicago. During the Second Industrial Revolution, steel became a major necessity in construction, which made steel a major exchange during the time. Many other businessmen contributed much to the United States economy, like J.P. Morgan with his banking company and Henry Ford, who was the founder of Ford Motor Company. Like Ford, many of these companies contributed to the growth of cities like Detroit with their cars and Rochester with Kodak, a technology company focused on imaging products. Throughout the late 1800s and early 1900s, a great amount of Americans have worked in factories or industries, but again, the United States would explore a new economic focus and change its major upholder of its economy. Once again, it started with the war. During World War II, many Americans didn't want to get involved in the war, but because of the Pearl Harbor attack, the United States had to step in the World War. Scrap metal drives took down many of the things that were built during the Industrial Revolution, like the Atlantic Avenue line in Boston, part of the MBTA. When the war ended, with Germany losing, many countries had their industry destroyed. Countries in Europe, which were mostly powerful before the war, were weaker because of the event. The war created two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Before the war, many people worked in factories and industries, which helped the United States economy. But now, the United States didn't need as much factories. Before the war, the United States had a lot of isolationists who didn't want to be part of the international relations. After the war ended, the United States would have been more advantageous if they were to step in and take part in international affairs because of the other countries' weak position. Now the United States government had more of a focus on services, where now the United States had the advantage of being the center of all business and trade. As jobs in the United States had started growing in annual income, more people in those areas with those jobs had acquired better lives. As Asian countries like China and Japan began to industrialize with cheaper exports than the United States didn't really have a reason to have factories when countries like Japan and China make the same things, but cheaper. So then, the number of factories in the United States started to decline, because of less need for them. When that happened, many industrialized cities, like Detroit, Buffalo, Rochester, and Pittsburgh, started having declining economies, because of less factories and industries to support their economy. Before World War II, the average American in the Great Lake region worked in a factory or industry. Because of that, more people started to lose jobs, and the gross domestic product per capita started to decrease. Now the average American wouldn't be working in industry, when you produce things, but they would be working in services, where you would get distributing, financing, checking, quality control. So people who could would move out of the Great Lake region to places where you could try to get a job, which would bring you enough money, because of its importance to the United States economy. Even though the United States abandoned its industrial economy, the United States gross domestic product is still growing, and the United States is still the most powerful country on earth. During America's history, the United States has explored many different types of economic focuses, like agricultural before the Civil War, industry during the technological revolution, and services after World War II to this very day. The United States encounters with war have made these drastic changes in its economy. From the Civil War, when the focus went from agricultural to industrial, to World War II, when America abandoned the idea of isolationism, started more international relations, and created an economy built of services instead of industry. The United States focused on exchange, how the exchange and exports, business, and deals with other countries. Ultimately, deciding if the United States is more open internationally or if it's more isolated. The United States has gone through many economic changes, but two drastic changes have left people jobless and cities breaking up. In conclusion, the hope is that any American could live the average American life.